Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, which was named by Poets and Writers a best book for writers. Every week, I speak with novelists, with authors, with writers of every niche to talk about their tips, their tricks, their strategies, and how the sauce is made, including creative advice. I'll talk about essays and articles and share my own experience from 3 decades of publishing. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. And follow along on Substack, where I share special clips for subscribers only at estelleserasmus.substack.com. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, and I'm working on a narrative nonfiction book with memoir, reporting, and cultural critique about my time in the 90s and early 2000s as a magazine editor-in-chief and dating diva. And today I'm so happy to have Abigail Myers, my former student at NYU's High School Academy program. And let me tell you a little bit about her. She's a passionate digital and multimedia storyteller who loves highlighting diverse perspectives and amplifying marginalized communities through the power of storytelling. She graduated with high honors from Simmons University's Gwen Iffel School, studying journalism and political science. Abigail has covered everything from local community news to national policy and has pursued academic research and creative writing. She is also a platinum ambassador for the Arthritis Foundation and enjoys harnessing the power of social media and digital literacy to optimize engagement with her audience. And I'm going to share in the show notes all the links where you can find her on social media. Welcome, Abigail.
It's so great to reconnect.
It was so wonderful when I first worked with you. I think it was 5 years ago. You were 17, the age that my daughter is now. And in the High School Academy, I have students, rising juniors and seniors from all over the world, come and study. And we do op-eds, features, essays, interviews, every single aspect of journalism framed around my book, Writing That Gets Noticed. When I taught you, my book was not published yet, but my book was published in 2023. So it was the principles that later ended up in the book that I taught from. And you just really, with flying colors, did everything. And then you kept in touch, which I love. You shared every step of your ongoing professional journey, and I love celebrating your successes. So can you talk a little bit about your experience working with me in the program? And then let's talk about what you're doing today and any questions that I can help you with.
Of course. So I didn't have really any sort of access to learn how to become a journalist when I was in high school. Didn't have a newspaper. There were no kind of reporting classes. The closest I could get was standard English curriculum, and then we had creative writing and everything. And I always knew throughout my whole life that my job title in some way was going to be storyteller. I've always loved writing, whether it's reporting or creative writing, anything that really falls under that umbrella, I was always really drawn to. I was a huge reader growing up as well. And during the pandemic, everyone was very isolated. I did a year and a half of high school completely online. It kind of had two sides to it. I had the wonderful gift of time to advance myself professionally, and I stumbled upon an ad on Instagram for the High School Academy, and I thought that it looked really cool. I was really interested in going to a big city for college, especially coming from a smaller town. And so I expressed my interest. I went through the application process, and then we ended up starting our class. And I definitely learned the ins and outs of journalism. And it gave me a really good introduction into the writing and the storytelling process that I could use later on when I carried that eventually into a newsroom or any sort of professional path that I was going to take. I always liked reading just different people that were making an impact in my community and the world around me. I also grew up in decent proximity to Washington, D.C., so I had national news everywhere. And so this definitely gave me a good introduction into that aspect of writing and reporting. And so I was able to use that. And I wrote a lot of feature stories. I've written personal essays, and I've also done my own little op-eds. I wrote and edited for my school newspaper when I went through college. I also did some work on the radio, and I've interned in local newsrooms where I was able to really take that I had learned some years ago and apply it to an actual newsroom. And so I was able to use that and apply it to that more kind of fast paced hustle environment, especially with breaking news, which was definitely a big thing. I feel like as time has gone on, there have been a lot of very culturally significant news events that have gone on, not just within my university community, but throughout the world around me as well. So it was a fantastic introduction into journalism, and it helped me kind of understand different beats and areas that I would want to report on in the future.
What are you doing today, and what are your questions for me that I can help you with?
Right now, I've definitely learned throughout my time, not just in your class and throughout my schooling, but I think my experiences have really taught me that storytelling has such a broad definition. So I've done a lot of work in social media, graphic design. I've really hit the decent umbrella within like a communications major. So I was able to do a lot of different things when I studied at Simmons. And so right now I'm working in creative services. So it's a lot of graphic design, messaging for a lot of different clients. So it's a bit of like account management, design work, corporate communications. It's not something I ever saw myself in, but I'm glad I'm here. I think a question for you that I have is that freelancing can be very overwhelming. I think, in particular, for a lot of people, having to craft an individual pitch that's impactful for you and then also unique to a lot of different news outlets, it can be very tedious and people can get burnt out very easily. So I was wondering, what kind of advice do you have for people in the storytelling world who are feeling the burnout and just are struggling to kind of keep going there?
Well, first of all, congratulations on what you're doing. I could totally see your skill sets and your ability to think on your feet and be resourceful as a real asset to your clients. And I think that's a great use. I think journalism today, I mean, the field is changing so much. The magazines are shutting down unless they're niche publications. AI is changing what publishers are contracting with. And I've said this before on the podcast, listicles are really not the purview of writers anymore. They're going to AI. Every publisher is contracting with AI in some form, whether it's back office, and then it expands as these things do. Where you are sounds a very good place for you to use your research and resource and interviewing skills, coupled with your ability to work under pressure, to hit deadlines, which is all part of the journalistic ethos. Now, today's market is changing so much in terms of pitching. You have to know the publication. So people say, oh, I'm going to send to this publication, I'm saying, have you read the recent issues? Have you, if it's print, have you looked online if it's digital? If you have an idea, and I have a whole section in writing that gets noticed called Pitch Clinic, which breaks down pitches from my point of view and the actual editor from the publication's point of view, what works, what doesn't, and why. And so for a pitch, you have to have a hook, right? It can't just be a topic. I want to write about depression. Okay, but what do you want to write about depression? Is there a study that's come out? And that's where you need to do Google alerts. I wonder if you have Google alerts going about topics that you're interested in writing about, because that's how you'll find the newest research, the newest studies, the newest polls, any kind of information that's coming out. I would say that if you have a hook, if you have an idea, you make sure that it hasn't been covered before, and then you put a very simple pitch together if you want to do an article. And these days, I understand that people don't want to give all their sources away, but I might give one source. It just helps the editor understand where you're coming from, because pitching to an editor is a confidence game. They have to get confident in being able to assign to you. So that's one thing that you can kind of stack the game in your favor by having a good idea, by doing your research, by sharing a little bit. You don't have to share everything of how you'll execute the idea. For instance, if you're saying I'm sharing the newest study that came out about depression in soccer players, right? And the reason is, I'm just making this up, but the reason potentially is there's a lot of physical exertion and that triggers something in the brain, and then people are taking it home. Purely non-scientific, but I'm giving it as an idea, as a theory. Now you're running with that. You're saying, I have soccer players to interview. I have this lead author of the study. I'll talk with the leading authors on athletics and pain, or athletics and depression. And now you're having something put together. Then you say, why you? Maybe you have an interest in soccer yourself. I've been playing soccer since my college years when I was varsity. So I have a good insight into how the process works. So something connecting you to the material. If you don't have clips, which a lot of times somebody starting out in the market doesn't, I would tangentially find something that you're working on that you can connect with it. So I contributed to a white paper on depression, or I often interview experts for the company where I work. Something that ties in with your ability to sell yourself to the editor. And of course, if you have any clips, you would show them. The burnout happens because it's harder and harder to break through the noise. And the way you do that is by using your resourcefulness, which you have, and your ability to stand out by showing that you know how to put a story together and how to sell a story to the editor. You know, burnout is tough. It happens in any profession, but journalists are being assailed from all sides. The former editors of magazines and online sites are sometimes being let go, they're losing their jobs, and they're jumping into the pool of candidates. So I would say doing strictly journalism now is a fraught area, but the skills of journalism will stand by you your whole life, whether it's writing a letter to insurance, selling the fact that they need to pay for some sort of service. And now you're involved with the Arthritis Foundation. So you're very involved in those kinds of decisions and those kinds of ways of showing something to the public. So the skills that you have are just so translatable, which I think is an important point to make if people feel they can't just be journalists like the old days. And I completely understand. I have former colleagues telling me that they went to content marketing after journalism, and then content marketing was taken by AI. And so what's happening is they're pursuing passions, right? We all have passions, sometimes from childhood. You could pull things that you were interested in and you can use those for stories. So there's always a way to mine your life for ideas. And I talk about the 4-step process in writing that gets noticed, of how you can set up a pie, you, your ideas, your thoughts, what makes you you, and then items in the news, and then the section on studies, and then you can connect them together. Or even celebrities talking about it. And that ties in with Google Alerts. Often you can ask AI to do the same thing that Google does. Because really what AI is becoming today, and ask anyone who's planning a trip abroad, they're not using Google because they'll get random hotels. They're asking AI to format their vacation plan. It's the same thing.
Do you think there's a particular AI platform that could be useful for journalism? I'm always really skeptical of them because I don't think I ever anticipated AI taking a passion of mine really over to the point where the job market is just so overwhelming and stressful, even for veteran journalists, with all of the mass layoffs that a lot of major news outlets have been having. Do you think there's a particular AI platform that, instead of taking over the job for a reporter, could supplement the work that a person is already doing?
I would say that AI is good for brainstorming. I would say that putting something into chat and asking for brainstorming ideas or title ideas. I'm still better at any title with my 30 years of experience than any AI is. I will stand up against AI for titles any day.
I love it.
Well, because I had 30 years of experience doing cover lines and headlines and using alliteration, using metaphor, using simile, but it could definitely help you as a brainstorming partner. Where it falls short, and I'm not saying that's going to change because it may, is voice. A writer has their voice. When you started sending me blogs that you were doing when you first graduated and you were doing different things, right? It's your voice, Abigail, and that is not replicable. And that is what the creativity factor in writing comes. So traditional journalists, there's a misnomer that journalists are very staid and very boring. Think about the piece that was written about Saturday Night Fever before it became a movie. It was a story. I believe it was in New York Magazine, and then it became a movie. But Pulitzer Prize winning pieces, I don't know if that won a Pulitzer, but they start with an inciting incident, something exciting happening, a fascinating piece of dialogue. So it's not that journalism is boring. It's that certain publications did not want writers to put their voice in.
Yeah.
And so that made it very staid. The people who excelled at that did not have a huge inclination to use their voice. I always wanted to use my voice. And I always said to my students, if you remember, if you're writing a reported article or essay, try to put a little something in the beginning or the end that shows you your connection to the material. It's not always possible. The people who are always very staid journalists, and that was maybe more back in the day, they went to content marketing because they didn't want voice in content marketing. So the places where you have a chance, and client work is good because clients can appreciate voice, is showing your voice in your writing. And that AI cannot duplicate. There are changes happening by the day. There are sites that are more graphically focused. I think proximity is one of them. I don't have experience with that. There are sites that are more like for analysis, but you always have to vet what you're doing. I mean, as a journalist, I've always been fact checking my material wherever I get it, wherever I find it. And one of the first tenets of what I teach is to go to the primary source, right? So you don't use a People magazine article, nothing against People, but if they're citing a statistic or a study, and you go to the original source or maybe where it originally was published and the publication that was published, whether it's a medical review or a journal, and then if you're interviewing, you would potentially interview the lead researcher. Did I answer your question?
Yes, perfectly. I guess something else that I've kind of been thinking about is a shift in beat reporting. So if I had a few years under my belt in, say, political reporting, and I wanted to shift to something like arts and entertainment or more of a lifestyle sort of thing, would you say that that's necessarily possible? Especially from a freelance perspective, if I had pitched several, I guess, political articles to different platforms, and then suddenly I'm pitching to an entertainment editor at the same outlet. What does that look like?
I talk about this a little bit in Writing That Gets Noticed, but I think if you are trying to switch your focus, for example, you write health and you want to write travel now.
Yeah.
So, what I would do is take pieces of your earlier focus and find a way to incorporate it into your new focus. For example, if you're interested in writing health, I would then maybe write about, if you're doing travel stories, about travel spots where you can get the most unusual or cutting edge health treatments. So you're now combining the two and you're starting to segue away from your former focus into what your now new focus is going to be. So if you're looking to go from political analysis to lifestyle, maybe you would want to do a piece about restaurants that some of the local political figures have eaten at and talked about. And then you would interview the chef for their recipes. So you're using politics, but you're combining it with a lifestyle focus, in this case, food and potentially entertainment. So that's a way that you can shift your focus.
That's great. And do you think there are any sort of unique or lesser seen skills that make a good reporter that people wouldn't necessarily think of?
I think a curious mind. I've been in publishing on both sides of the publishing wall, an assigning editor, editor in chief, somebody who wrote prolifically, who's had students write and get published in Modern Love, New York Times, Washington Post, all the places. And I think that the biggest skill, and my friend Abigail Thomas is a good representative of that, is to always have a curious mind. And she'll look at something and think, why is that? And I think that is key with being a creative person, with being a journalist. So it's a skill set that is not often spoken about, but if you have it, it enables you to be resourceful. It enables you to pivot. I just recently spoke at FIT to graduating students and said, you need to learn how to work with AI, and here's why. Because every job that you're going to be applying to is having some sort of a deal, including traditional legacy media, is contracting with AI companies. So if you don't know how to work with AI and make it work for you, you're going to be behind. And in fact, I think that the future is that there are going to be teams in companies or with clients, and there will be one designated person to work with the AI member of the team. That to me is the future that I see, definitely for media. Journalists, we're seeing how this is all shaking out at the moment in real time.
Yeah, I'm already seeing, at least within the local sphere of the USA Today or Gannett papers, I'm already seeing AI assisted reporting. And that title to me is just really fascinating. But then I'm always struggling to get more detail on what it's actually being used for. I'm seeing a story written by a reporter, and then I'm seeing this was written with assistance from AI. And so, how do you think journalists can really use it to the full potential? I know you mentioned brainstorming is definitely the biggest thing. And would you say people can really use it for anything beyond that? Or would you think it's kind of taking away that humanization?
Yeah, using it like Google, almost using it like PubMed, right? These are search devices, and using it as a form of search has been effective for many people. Again, anything it tells you, you have to vet very carefully because AI does make things up.
Yeah.
You also don't know if you're doing a search on Google that you're going to get a credible source, right? So if you're doing a search for, let's say, you're doing a piece on energy companies. And so you want to go to the website and cite like the head of the organization or the media spokesperson. And so you're doing a search on Google and it's pulling it up. And you're going ahead, and maybe you're a novice, and you're saying, oh, that's great. This is a great site. It has so much about energy in it. What you don't know, and what's in the fine print, is that this is a proprietary site that's owned by a company, a manufacturer of an energy source, which makes it not credible because it's not a source that's impartial. So if you go ahead and, at least in the traditional media that I was raised up in, if you go ahead and share that with your editor, it will hurt your credibility factor. As I said, I would not use AI for writing.
Do you have any particular outlets, websites, or platforms that you would recommend for people who are interested in going even the freelance route for journalism or pursuing a career in reporting in general?
First of all, I would start with my own material. Writing That Gets Noticed is really almost a master's program in journalism in one book. Covers reporting, interviewing, sites, credible sites that you can use, pitching, essays, everything. I would also look at Freelance Writing Direct, which is my podcast where I share author interviews, and just like this interview with journalists and freelancers of every niche, talking about the tips, the strategies. And I also have coaching episodes, and I report on publishing news such as the US Book Show, which I recently did an episode on. I also have a Substack, Estelle S. Erasmus.substack.com, which gives craft advice and tips on things like the echo effect in writing and writing micro memoir. And paid subscribers get an opportunity for me to review their material. There are other sites. There's Neiman's Storyboard, which is a journalism site that gives credible and good information. Jane Friedman, who is a publishing guru, janefriedman.com, has a newsletter, which is really, really helpful for publishing. So those are some of the resources I highly, highly recommend using.
That's great.
Can you talk a little bit about your work with the Arthritis Foundation?
I began volunteering in 2024. I was able to meet with a lot of contacts and different people who had a lot of shared experiences that I did, who were impacted by chronic disease in a huge variety of different ways. And so that started by going to the other side of work I had already done. I spent 2 summers and then a fall semester interning for my member of Congress at the time, and then also a state representative in Boston. And so I shifted from being one side of an interview or a constituent meeting to the other when I was the constituent telling a story that was really specifically promoting pieces of legislation or wanting to emphasize the importance of something that would be life-changing for people who are impacted by arthritis. And so it was definitely a little bit of, I guess for lack of a better term, a culture shock when I shifted from one side of the table to another. But I definitely learned a lot. I've had meetings that have been really great. I have a lot of personalized literature. I try to kind of tailor each meeting specifically to a different office and tailor my story in different ways that I never even saw coming. And I've had a lot of different hardships, like kind of when you mention writing letters to insurance, I've spent hours on the phone asking, why has my medication shifted from being completely free to being thousands of dollars a month? That's not sustainable for anyone. So it kind of goes beyond saying the healthcare system is broken and needs revamped for patients, for healthcare providers, and even from people on the insurance side of things to here is a personal story from a younger person, because oftentimes, when you think of arthritis, you think of your grandparents or people of older age. You never think of teenagers, kids, young adults being impacted by it in a lot of different ways. And so that, I think, is another captivating tool in itself. And then just being able to kind of tell it naturally in a way that makes it matter not only to you, but to the entire constituency that they serve is definitely important.
So I want to jump in. I see a role for you. With your journalism ability, your writing ability, your youth platform, I think you should propose that you do some sort of writing blog or question and answer on the actual foundation website.
That would be great.
This will build your name. This will help reach out to a growing segment of the population that they're interested in. And you can use it for your storytelling and also your advocacy. And you need to have your byline.
Definitely. I have a Substack where I'm blogging my own experiences with that sort of thing. And I've been like featured in different news articles about it, but definitely taking that individual perspective with not just my Substack audience in mind, or not being the one interviewed for a certain audience, and being able to broadly appeal to that whole community.
Broaden what you want to do, like aim high. Maybe you want to be the youth spokesperson for the foundation, right? So everything you do is geared towards that. And that could eventually be an ask and bring you to the next stage of your career.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see. I'm optimistic, but I've asked and I've put myself out there for different writing or storytelling, social media assignments before. It just depends. It's all contingent on their availability, but I've definitely put myself out there and they know what I'm interested in. And so they found a lot of opportunities that would even appeal to me in general. So that's actually how I got interviewed for different news articles about it, and how I've shared different videos and written pieces. So can only go up from here.
Absolutely. Oh, you have a very fruitful career ahead of you, and I can't wait to be watching as you go along. So I hope this has been really helpful for you.
Of course.
It's been such a pleasure talking with you, and I'm always So thrilled to see students like you succeed.
Yes, thank you so much. I mean, I can't forget where I started. So this is really full circle. This is really great.
Follow me at estelleserasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.